Order. Mr. Clerk, would you please take attendance?
Chair Hadsma,
Present.
Representatives Menser,
Present.
Colzar,
Here.
O'Neill,
Present.
Andrews, Churches, Wagella,
Here.
Wozniak,
Here.
Mueller,
Here.
Kuntz.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a motion to accept minutes from the March 8, 2003. Representative Wagella motions. The minutes are adopted. Okay, we're here this morning to allow additional testimony on Representative Colzar's bill, House Bill 4044. At this time, I'd like to invite up Kathy Martin and Muna Mashra from Dearborn to give testimony.
Good morning. I'm
morning.
Kathy Martin.
And I'm Muna Mashra.
We'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee members for the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 4044. This bill will help educators by forcing management to bargain in good faith and ensure that workers don't have to pay unfair costs. Educators' morale has been negatively impacted by the consistent attacks on school employees and the loss of key bargaining rights with issues such as evaluations and placement. The evaluation process has now become one that is punitive as opposed to constructive. Instead of helping teachers improve and refine their skills, it punishes them on things that they cannot control, such as health issues or building and district-wide test data. In regards to placement, unions should have the ability to negotiate this to ensure that educators are moved or placed in positions that correspond with their experience and passion. A teacher that spent 10 years teaching second grade and suddenly moved to fifth, or a social worker who excels at working with high school students and is moved down to the elementary level, does both the educators and the students a disservice. These moves are not always done with what's best in mind for students.
In addition to losing key bargaining rights, we also have to contend with the diminishing pension. The promise of a full pension and health care benefits at retirement were once very appealing to bring people into the education field. Now the changes that have gutted those past promises no longer incentivize people to come into the field or stay for the entirety of their career. We have many young educators that stay for a short period of time and move into the private sector for all of the reasons mentioned. This bill would help to ensure that management does bargain in a fair manner with the unions. We've seen an exodus of school employees and a decline in graduates from education-related fields, and HB 4004 would help to ensure the bargaining rights and the education of future generations.
Any questions of either Ms. Martin or Ms. Mushra? Yes, Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you use the word attack? Have you guys been attacked physically, or how did you mean that word?
The profession has been attacked. We work in a district where we've actually faced threats. Leaving school board meetings, people are standing outside in the parking lot threatening physical harm upon us.
That's
So
parents?
I have not physically been touched. However, my personal space has been invaded by people.
And that's usually parents?
It has been parents, but they are emboldened by some of the laws that have been taking place, not necessarily in Michigan, but in other states.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Martin. Thank you, Ms. Mushra, for coming in from Dearborn today to testify. Next, we have Mr. Matthew Schuler. He represents the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators, offering testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm a little bit under the weather, and I almost took NyQuil instead of DayQuil, so could have been really fun. I am the Director of Government Relations for the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators. We represent more than 600 public school superintendents and central office administrators in the state. I wanted to briefly touch on House Bill 4044 and why we are opposing the bill as introduced, but also want to address other concerns and issues that were brought up in previous testimony on this bill to ensure there are no misconceptions on where our members stand on the educator shortage and other important issues facing our public schools. First, on House Bill 4044, we do oppose the bill as introduced. Our chief concern when discussing contractual negotiations is making sure that both sides come to the table and there is an incentive to negotiate. Since this law was passed, contracts are being ratified overwhelmingly. We want that to continue. We are committed to ensuring that this is a fair process for both sides that benefits our public schools. However, I do want to make clear that we are willing to work with the sponsor and this committee on changes that would address issues raised in previous testimony. Specifically, we would love to sit down to discuss changes to the law that would address the issue that Rep. Kolazar raised with using rising healthcare costs as a negotiating tool so that teachers are not punished and bearing increased healthcare costs when negotiating their contracts. With that said, I wanted to talk a little bit more about our members. Many of them were teachers and principals before becoming superintendents. They are educators. Their job is to provide the best learning environment for kids, period. Many of the items raised previously, our members are 100% in agreement with. The educator shortage, and I wanted to say this is an educator shortage, not just a teacher shortage. It's a building-wide issue. It's paras, it's bus drivers. That is our top priority right now. We supported initiatives in the budget to attract and retain teachers and outlined them in our list of our priorities for this term. We are supporting efforts to increase wages as well as efforts to strengthen the retirement system for educators. Putting it plainly, we know schools do not work without teachers. Additionally, we are committed to working together with our partners in labor on repealing the third grade reading retention requirement, reworking educator and administrator evaluations, and repealing the ADAF accountability system, which Representative Kolazar recently introduced. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing: valued educators, great schools, and the best possible learning environment for our children. Finally, on labor issues, I want to reiterate that we as an association have committed and asked to sit down with our colleagues to see what common ground we can find. There are a lot of policies and laws enacted in the last decade that need a comprehensive review. We want to have a holistic, honest discussion on these issues and work together to come up with solutions that make our educators feel valued. Looking at this law in context, it was passed when the legislature cut school funding, and in many cases, the only way for schools to balance their budget was to ask for concessions. It was an environment constructed to pit school administrators and teachers against one another. I would draw a straight line between underfunding schools and many policies previously enacted in Lansing, including this law. One final point: while we are optimistic that funding will continue to improve under this legislature, our members also must look to the long-term outlook. Between continued discussions on tax cuts and school aid revenue being diverted from the classroom, as well as the possibility of a loss of revenue in the event of a recession, we must be very cautious and try to avoid what our members and all educators lived through more than a decade ago. I want to reiterate to members of this committee that even if there are a few specific areas of disagreement, we are committed educators who want to partner with teachers on ensuring that Michigan's public school system does a great job preparing students to be citizens that values our educators for the professionals that they are. We look forward to partnering with you, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schuler. Representative Kuntz has a question for you.
Thank you for coming today. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. You had mentioned contract ratification, and that is continuing to be mostly accepted. Can you expand a little bit on that? You know, is this a percentage? And how will this law, if it is repealed as submitted, how will it affect contracts ratification going forward?
So we surveyed our membership, and again, I don't have the exact number, but overwhelmingly, contracts are being ratified on time. They've reported that the relationship with the unions have improved. I don't want to speculate on the impact of this bill. I would say, again, our concern is more long-term with if funding does go down and we're put in that space where we were, frankly, a decade ago, where we are kind of pitted against each other. We just want to make sure that both sides are willing to come to the table and negotiate to make sure that we get contracts ratified in time for school to start.
Representative Andrews first, and then you, Representative Wagella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming to testify today. So we're talking about contract ratification, and I was reading both your analysis and the one that was sent over by the Mackinac Policy Center, which both talk about this contract ratification process. And The thing that I want to kind of mention here is that contract ratification is a two-way street. There's two parties at contract negotiations, and just because contract negotiation now feels to be expedient and good and workable for your end does not mean that that is the same that's happening on the other side of the table. And I think that what we're undoing here is created a pretty serious unbalance in the power structure around contract ratification and around contract negotiation. So of course things feel faster and more expedient on your end because the hands have been tied on the other side of the table and made to feel like they have fewer options and fewer choices. So I would say that just because maybe contracts take longer to negotiate doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It means that we're maybe getting more equitable and better contracts for all parties involved.
And again, we want to see contracts done in time for school. And I also want to just reiterate from my testimony, we would love to sit down and talk about parts of this bill. We oppose it for the complete repeal, but there are definitely areas that the sponsor has raised that I think we're willing to talk about.
Representative Wegela.
Wagella, it's close. We're getting there. Sorry, Chair. You did. You got it right once. Anyway, Rep. Andrews touched on a lot of what I wanted to say, but I think just something that I want to bring attention to is in the negotiation process. I feel like this bill actually gives an uneven keel to administrators because they can essentially wait out the clock. Sorry, not this bill. What this bill will undo. Another thing is, when we talk about labor and we talk about people negotiating, one thing that most avenues of labor have is the ability to strike when there's not an agreement. And educators in the state don't have that ability. So tied with this bill, it really makes it an uneven keel. So I guess one of the questions that I have is, what makes education so much different than any other kind of labor? And why is there not a more balanced scale?
I would definitely concede that education is different, and I think, frankly, it's because it is so fundamental to our communities as far as schools need to be open, teachers need to be teaching kids. I would just say that, again, the changes that were made a decade ago were made in one environment. I think that environment is different, and like I said, I think what we want, and I think previous testimony touched on this, is we want both sides to come to the table. We want, we just don't want to see what did happen prior in some occasions where, contracts weren't ratified and the community just didn't know what was going to happen.
I just kind of a follow-up, if that's okay, Chair. I think what I'm trying to say is that I really feel that this bill will actually make that negotiation a more transparent and fair process because there won't be districts that are waiting the clock out because educators have no other tools in their resources. That's the point I'm trying to make. And thank you.
Representative Colazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. One thing I just want to point out is while we agree to disagree on this issue, I do think it's important to point out that school administrators and teachers and parapros, support staff, the school boards, the entire community, on most issues are a team that work well together, and I am looking forward to working with you on many, many other issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schuler. Now we have one educator from Grand Rapids. I apologize, you were here 2 weeks ago and didn't get an opportunity to speak. I'll call forward Matt Marlowe. Well, at least he was, by my notes, supposed to be here, but I apologize to Mr. Marlowe and another Grand Rapids educator and a representative from East Point who too were here 2 weeks ago and didn't have opportunity to speak. Next, I have Jonathan Bird, a trustee at Kellogg Community College.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today. Actually here in a different capacity than I usually am in front of this committee. So in addition to representing the Michigan Laborers Union, I'm also on the board of Kellogg Community College. Have been on that board for now 16 years. And we are here in support of the legislation. From a management perspective and from a board perspective, this legislation gives us an additional tool to make our educators whole if contract negotiations, take longer than necessary. I don't think, we don't practice, adversarial negotiations at our organization. Most of the time, our contracts are negotiated timely. We don't have often contracts that go past the deadline. However, if a contract does, and it's because of various issues that arise, whether it's more information comes in that impact negotiations, or we have a pandemic, or other issues impact negotiations, we feel there's no reason that our hands should be tied as to whether or not we can properly what's the word I'm looking for? Properly compensate our employees. We have absolutely no objection. I did check with the Michigan Community College Association. They are neutral on this bill, so I'm certainly not here speaking on behalf of the MCCA and just here on behalf of Kellogg Community College. But we definitely support the legislation, and certainly with a different hat on today, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Byrd? Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Byrd. Do you have any idea what type of impact this has on a school budget? I can't think that it's a lot of money, but maybe it is.
Sure. So thank you for the question, Representative. Most times negotiations don't take much longer than when the contract's ended. In my experience, I would say we might have had, in my past 16 years, one contract that maybe ran a month over, and it might have been due to illness, or it might have been due to the bargaining unit not being able to schedule a meeting to, ratify the contract in time, and or the board being able to come to, or to get a quorum to be able to ratify it on our side. So it would be, maybe a month or two of, the additional costs of the new contract. So I actually think it's rather minuscule. It's just, I think we ought to be able to, allow our employees to be compensated for what we agreed to.
Thank you for coming in your different role.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming in today. So you used the word minuscule, and you said once in 16 years. This is a problem this is a solution looking for a problem, right? This is a minute. Well, wait, now your words were minuscule.
Sure.
And your words were once in 16 years.
Sure.
So this doesn't sound like it's an existing problem, or it's a minuscule problem that happens once every 16 years. Why are we? Why
it
are
is,
we
but I
swinging
would
the law?
say, why would we want to penalize our employees because of situations outside of our control? Like it's not the college that doesn't want to compensate them for what we agreed to at the bargaining table, but why should we be prohibited from being able to do that? We've never, both sides always want to come together and get a contract done. That's never been our experience where I live, right? We take negotiations seriously. We just finished negotiations with one of our units, and it hasn't been an issue. But why take a tool out of our box per se to be able to compensate our employees the way that we, as a local unit of government, want to compensate them?
Right. Representative Colazar.
To call it minuscule or problem or solution in search of a problem, I would strongly encourage anybody who thinks that to go talk to the single mom that I taught with, stuck on Bachelor Step 2, had to go to her parents' house every single night to get food because of food insecurity. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me. I have some cards to read in the record. First, from Mr. Lincoln Stocks, an employee of East Point Schools. Mr. Stocks was here on March 2. He wasn't afforded the opportunity to speak simply because we ran out of time, and the record should reflect he's in support of that bill. I also have cards from Steve DeLee from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. He is opposed to the bill. And John Severson from the Michigan Association of Intermediate School Administrators, also opposed to the bill. I appreciate all who have come before the committee or presented cards to share your thoughts. This time, do I have a motion to report out House Bill 4044? Representative Colasar makes that motion and report that out with recommendation. Will the clerk please take the roll?
I do have a point of order question.
Yes, sir.
Representative Colasar has presented the bill and testified. Are questions available for him? I think I'm late in the game for that, but I didn't know.
I think you're late in the game because he did testify 2 weeks ago. I appreciate the desire to question him, but I think that we had that opportunity 2 weeks ago. But thank you,
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chair.
Coons. All right, Mr. Clerk, would you take the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Hatzma,
Yes.
Representatives Menser,
Yes.
Colzar,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Andrews.
Yes.
Churches, Wagella,
Yes.
Wozniak.
Yes.
Mueller,
No.
Coons.
No.
Mr. Chair, you have 7 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. HB 4044 is reported for recommendation.
We do have an absent member. I entertain a motion to excuse that absent member. Thank you. Representative Coons moves. No further business being before this committee. The committee is now adjourned.